The morning of February 14th arrived with a cruel, golden clarity. Julian stood by his bedroom window, watching the frost retreat from the glass. At 18, he felt as though he had lived a century in a single year. The world outside was beginning to blush with the pinks and reds of a holiday he no longer recognized. To everyone else, it was a day of presence. To him, it was a day of profound absence. He reached into a dusty shoebox beneath his bed, pulling out a photograph from a decade ago. In the picture, two children stood in a playground, their faces smeared with chocolate. Julian and Alara had been inseparable since they were 7. That year, they had exchanged paper hearts made of construction paper and glitter. It was a simple, sticky-fingered pact that they would always be each other's person, no matter what the winters brought. By the time they reached 16, the paper hearts had turned into whispered promises under the neon lights of the town's old cinema. Julian remembered the smell of Ilara's popcorn and the way she would lean her head on his shoulder during the sad parts of movies. They weren't just childhood friends anymore. They were the architects of a future they saw clearly in each other's eyes. They had a map of the world pinned to her bedroom wall, marked with all the places they would go together. But the maps were folded away when the autumn air turned sharp and Alara's laughter began to fade into tired smiles. The vibrant girl who loved to run through rain puddles was suddenly confined to a world of white sheets and the rhythmic ticking of hospital monitors. Alara sat by the window of her room, watching the leaves fall, her spirit a flickering candle in a sudden storm. She looked out at the sky, her eyes reflecting a horizon she feared she would never reach. Last Valentine's Day, Julian had transformed her sterile hospital room into a sanctuary of red roses and fairy lights. He sat by her bed, holding her hand, which felt as light as a bird's wing. They didn't talk about the future or the maps. They simply existed in the quiet warmth of the present. Alara had pressed a small, sealed envelope into his palm and told him not to open it until the following year. It was a gift of time she knew she didn't have. Now, a year later, the silence of the house was deafening. Julian walked toward the coastal pier, the place where they had spent their last summer evening. The wind pulled at his coat, and the gray Atlantic waves crashed against the pillars with a morning song. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life, walking the paths they had once carved together, now filled with the echoes of a voice he could only hear in his dreams. He sat at the very end of the pier and finally pulled the envelope from his pocket. The paper was worn at the edges, smoothed by his thumb over months of waiting. Her handwriting on the front was shaky but unmistakable. For Julian, when the frost returns. His breath hitched in the cold air as he carefully tore the seal, feeling as though he were breaking a thin thread that still connected him to her world. Inside was a single hand-drawn paper heart, much like the ones they made when they were 7. On the back, she had written, "Love isn't a destination on a map, Julian. It's the light that stays in the room after the candle goes out. Don't stop walking because I had to sit down. Take my heart to all those places we marked. I am the wind in the sails, not the anchor." Julian clutched the paper to his chest, the tears finally breaking through the dam of his composure. He stood up and pulled a small paper lantern from his bag, something they had planned to release together. He struck a match, the flame dancing defiantly against the ocean breeze. As the paper began to glow with a soft, orange warmth, he felt a strange sense of peace. The weight in his chest didn't vanish, but it felt different, less like a stone and more like a compass. Julian let go. The lantern rose slowly, caught by a sudden upward draft, drifting higher and higher until it was just a tiny amber star against the deepening blue of the February sky. He watched it until it vanished, knowing that Alara was right. The day wasn't about the flowers that wither or the cards that fade. It was about the courage to love something so much that its loss changes the shape of your soul. He turned back toward the shore, ready to start walking again.